Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. And today we're looking at something that, well, I'm sure most of us have seen in action, even if we haven't done it ourselves, right? Lifeguarding. We've got this great article here by Andre Mendez, 10 lifeguard interview questions and their answers. It's the updated 2024 version. And we figured let's use this as a springboard to kind of really understand what makes a lifeguard truly effective. A kind of person you'd want watching over you or your family when you're at the pool or the beach.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even if you're not planning on rocking the red and yellow yourself, I think understanding the responsibilities and skills involved gives you a whole new level of appreciation for what it takes to keep people safe around water, right?
That's a really good point. I mean, these interview questions, when you dig into them, they're not just about getting a job. They're about revealing how a candidate thinks under pressure, how they prioritize safety. Are they really prepared for the very real weight of this role? Because it's a big responsibility.
It is.
And by exploring how to approach these questions, I think our listeners, even those not pursuing lifeguarding, will gain a much clearer picture of what it truly means to be that guardian in a watery environment.
Okay, so let's jump right in, and we'll start with a scenario that hopefully none of us ever actually have to witness, but it's something lifeguards need to be prepared for. A panicked swimmer.
Right.
The article talks about the importance of calming the person down, but it also brings up this thing called the reach, throw, row, go technique. Can you break that down for us? Why is that ordered approach so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So think of reach, throw, row, go as like a hierarchy of intervention.
Okay.
You always start with the safest option for everyone involved. So reach is your first go-to. Can you help the person from the edge of the pool or the shore using, an arm, a pole, a towel, anything to extend your reach without actually getting in the water yourself?
Makes sense.
That keeps you safe, right?
Right.
If reaching's not an option, then you move to throw. Can you toss them a flotation device, like a rescue buoy? If the distance is too much for a throw, then row comes into play. This is where you'd use a boat or some type of watercraft to reach them. And finally, go, actually entering the water for a direct rescue, well, that's your absolute last resort.
So it's like a step-by-step escalation.
Exactly. And this staged approach isn't just about protecting the lifeguard. It's about minimizing the overall risk and maximizing the chances of a successful rescue. You don't want to create another potential victim by rushing into a situation that could have been handled differently.
Right. You want to compound the problem.
Mhm.
And the article also emphasizes the importance of reassuring the swimmer, to talking to them calmly. But when someone's panicking in the water, how much can words really help? I mean, in your experience.
I think it's more critical than you might imagine. You've got to remember a panicked swimmer isn't thinking rationally. Fear has basically hijacked their brain. So a calm, clear voice, it can actually be a lifeline. It can cut through that panic, build a little bit of trust and allow the swimmer to grab onto those instructions and start to regain control. It's about projecting competence and control even in a completely chaotic situation.
It's like you become an anchor.
In a way, yeah. And that's why the article mentions referencing prior experience, even if it's not a full-blown drowning situation.
Right.
What that shows the interviewer, and what a good lifeguard understands, is that you can draw on past responses to guide your actions in a new crisis. It demonstrates a foundation of preparedness, that you've been there before, even on a smaller scale, and you know how to handle it.
So let's move on to another critical skill here. First aid. There's an interview question about a time you applied first aid, and they use the example of a child with a cut leg.
Okay.
What's the real point they're trying to assess with a question like that?
Well, I think it boils down to this. Can you apply what you've learned under pressure?
Okay.
Because anyone can memorize the steps in a first aid course, right? But the real test is, can you stay focused when you're in the moment, assess the situation accurately, and act decisively, even if it seems like a minor thing, like a cut?
Right.
So the child with the cut leg, it's a simple scenario, but it allows the candidate to walk through their process. How would they approach the child? How do they keep them calm? And maybe any parents or adults who are freaking out. What are the specific steps they would take for cleaning and bandaging? And this is important, the follow through. Did they report the incident properly?
Right.
If you're listening, think about any time you've had to troubleshoot something. It's not just about knowing the steps. It's about that calm, methodical execution, even when things are a little bit stressful.
Okay, so what about a situation where a swimmer's clearly struggling, but they refuse help? I mean, that feels like a really tricky situation to navigate.
It is. It is. And that kind of question really gets at a lifeguard's judgment. Like, when do you respect someone's wishes? And when does your duty to their safety override that?
Right.
So the key, like the article says, is to start with clear, reassuring communication. Explain your concern, why you think they might need assistance. Now, initially, you wouldn't physically force help. You'd monitor them closely, keep a very close eye on them.
Right.
But, and this is crucial for everyone to understand, safety comes first. If the situation starts to get worse, you got to be assertive. You might need to take action even if they're still saying no. And that's where involving a supervisor comes in.
Okay.
They provide backup, another level of, decision-making in those complex situations. The swimmer's well-being, that's your ultimate responsibility, even if they don't see the danger themselves.
And things can change so quickly, right?
Absolutely.
The article also talks about simultaneous incidents. Like, what happens if two emergencies are unfolding at the same time? How do you even begin to handle that? What's the first thing you do?
Well, in those moments, rapid assessment and prioritization, those are non-negotiable. You have to scan both situations, figure out which one poses the most immediate threat to life, like who is in the most danger right now, and act on that first.
This is like a triage situation almost.
It is. It is. And like the article mentions, calling for backup if there are other lifeguards around, that is crucial. The whistle, it's not just for attention. It's a signal that something's wrong, you need help, and you might even need to clear the area, right? Prevent more incidents or just make space for the rescue efforts. For anyone listening, I think this highlights the importance of triage in any situation, right? Making tough decisions with limited resources under pressure.
So teamwork is obviously essential here. And the article talks about a swimmer having a seizure. How does that scenario show how important it is to have a coordinated team response?
Well, the seizure example, it's perfect because it shows how a good team can be so much more effective than individuals acting alone. So one lifeguard, the one closest to the swimmer, they're focused on providing immediate in-water support. They got to make sure the airway's clear, prevent further injury. But the other lifeguard, their role becomes equally important. They're activating the emergency action plan, calling for medical help, maybe even managing the crowd or the area around the incident. So you've got this division of labor, making sure everything that needs to happen is happening at the same time. And clear communication between the lifeguards, that's the glue that holds it all together. They got to communicate what's going on, what they're doing, what they need, quickly and accurately. I think this demonstrates that even in a job that might seem solitary sometimes, sitting in that high chair, teamwork and communication are absolutely essential for successful outcomes in those critical moments.
Yeah, it's not just about individual heroism. You have to work together. And lifeguarding, it's not just about what happens in the water, is it? The article also talks about out-of-pool emergencies, and they give this example of a child getting injured in a park nearby. Why is it important for lifeguards to be prepared for stuff like that, things that aren't happening right in their zone?
Because, people see the lifeguard as a first responder. They are often seen as a figure of authority, not just for the pool area, but for the whole facility grounds. Their training, their mindset, it's not limited to the water's edge.
They are a safety presence.
Exactly. So the example with the child falling in the park, it just highlights how adaptable their emergency response skills need to be. The core principles we've talked about. Assess the situation, keep the person calm, provide basic care, call for help. All that applies whether it's a water emergency or an injury on dry land. It shows that the skills and that sense of responsibility, they extend way beyond just preventing drownings.
So let's shift gears now and talk about safety and prevention. The article asks about potential non-water dangers, and they use the example of broken glass. What should a lifeguard do immediately in a situation like that? What does it tell us about their responsibilities?
So first things first, prevent further injury. You got to immediately clear the area, make sure nobody steps on that glass. Then report the hazard to management so they can get it cleaned up properly. It's not enough to just see the danger. A good lifeguard takes action to isolate it and make sure it's dealt with. I think this is a good illustration of how a lifeguard's focus isn't just on the pool itself, but on the overall safety of the entire environment. They're like safety advocates in the broadest sense.
Right. And maintaining that constant focus, especially during long hours of surveillance, that must be mentally exhausting. The article talks about staying hydrated, rotating surveillance areas, things like that. Why is it so important to stay vigilant, and how do those strategies help?
Unwavering vigilance, it's the foundation of good lifeguarding. Because even a small lapse in attention, it can have huge consequences in a dynamic environment like a pool, right? People are moving around, things are
You
happening.
can't zone out.
Exactly. So staying hydrated, that helps you stay physically and mentally alert. Rotating surveillance areas that can combat fatigue and help you maintain a fresh perspective. You're scanning the pool with renewed focus each time you switch. This really highlights the demanding mental side of the job. It's not passive. You're constantly scanning, assessing, anticipating potential problems. And, lives depend on that
It's
attentiveness.
a big responsibility.
It is.
And of course, rescue equipment is a huge part of the job. The article mentions rescue tubes and buoys. Can you explain the difference and how a lifeguard would typically use each one?
Yeah, sure. So the rescue tube, that's your primary tool for direct contact rescues. It's buoyant, and the lifeguard can use it to support a struggling swimmer, keep their head above water while they bring them back to safety. The rescue buoy, on the other hand, it's often shaped like a torpedo and is designed for throwing to a swimmer who's further away.
Right.
It provides immediate flotation until the lifeguard can reach them. And like the article points out, being familiar with this equipment, knowing how to use it quickly and effectively in an emergency, that's super important.
And finally, let's talk about enforcing pool rules. The article emphasizes explaining the rule, being friendly but also firm when you need to be.
Yeah.
What's the key to striking that balance?
The goal is to keep everyone safe while, avoiding unnecessary conflict. So starting with a clear and friendly explanation of why the rule exists, that often helps. People are more likely to cooperate if they understand the reasoning behind it. But if someone keeps ignoring the rules, then a firm but respectful reminder becomes necessary. And knowing when to escalate, when to get a supervisor involved, that shows good judgment and an understanding of how to use your authority appropriately. Again, this emphasizes the communication and interpersonal skills that a lifeguard needs. It's not all about physical rescue skills, it's about interacting with people effectively too.
So, taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, the article touches on the general job description of a lifeguard, highlights some key skills. What stands out to you when you think about what a lifeguard does?
I think the range of skills involved is pretty remarkable. It goes way beyond just being a strong swimmer. You
Mhm.
need that physical strength and fitness, but you also need sharp observation skills. You got to
Yeah.
be able to solve problems quickly, and you need those interpersonal skills, communicating clearly, taking charge in an emergency. And the first aid and CPR certification, that emphasizes the importance of being ready to provide immediate medical care. And like you said earlier, these skills, they're useful in all kinds of aquatic environments, which just shows how valuable they are.
And the article also talks about potential career paths.
Mhm.
It mentions swim instructor, pool manager, even roles in emergency services. It seems like lifeguarding can be a great stepping stone. What makes those skills so transferable?
Well, the experiences you gain as a lifeguard, the responsibility, the quick thinking under pressure, the teamwork, knowing how to communicate with people who are stressed or even in danger, those are valuable in so many different fields. And it's natural to move up within aquatics, becoming an instructor or a manager. But the skills you learn in emergency response and leadership, those can open doors to careers in, EMS, firefighting, maybe even law enforcement. It really shows how practical and adaptable the lifeguard skill set is. And I think there are even lessons there for our listeners. Even if you never wear the uniform, those skills can be helpful in your everyday life and career.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear that lifeguarding is so much more than just sitting by the pool. It's about constant preparedness, making quick decisions, communicating clearly, and having a genuine commitment to the safety and well-being of everyone in and around the water.
Absolutely. And I think by understanding those aspects, whether you're thinking about becoming a lifeguard or just spending time around water, it helps you appreciate the responsibility that comes with it and the skills it takes to keep people safe.
And that brings us to our final thought for today. We've talked a lot about risk assessment and emergency response in the context of lifeguarding. But think about how those principles apply to other areas of your life. Places where safety and well-being are important. What are some of the unseen dangers in your daily routine? And what proactive steps, inspired by the vigilance of a lifeguard, could you take to stay safe and help keep those around you safe? It's a question that goes way beyond the pool and encourages all of us to be more aware, more prepared for whatever might come our way. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.